Alright, so in this video, I want to talk about the use of autopilot in a G1000 airplane. Now, you already might be familiar that the FAA has approved the use of technically advanced airplanes for commercial certification instead of complex airplanes. And so there's quite a lot of transitioning going on right now. I know because I started my commercial training in a complex airplane, and so I had to complete the remainder of my training in that complex airplane as well. But that is not the case anymore. If you have a technically advanced airplane, you can very well use that. Now, one of the things that makes an airplane a technically advanced airplane is the presence of a functioning autopilot in the airplane. And so I'll just show you real quick, just basic stuff like climbs and descents and turns in a Cessna 172 G1000 airplane. Right, so before we actually go ahead and start doing, start using the autopilot, I want to talk about what the flight director is. So, flight director is basically a guide that is provided to the pilot and the autopilot that is to be followed in order to achieve a specific flight attitude. The flight director shows changes in the roll and the pitch axes to reflect these changes. So let's go back to our cockpit real quick. Okay, so we can see the PFD right now. Everything is turned on. So ignore everything that is going on above the screen right now. Just focus on the artificial horizon, the yellow bar. So that is our artificial horizon. So the magenta thing is actually the flight director. So it's exactly the same as the artificial horizon. The only difference is the magenta bar moves same as the attitude indicator. The only thing it reflects a specific change in the flight attitude that we need to be in order to achieve a target. So let's say we are flying at 3,000 feet right now. I want to climb up to 5,000 feet. So what the flight director will do is it will show changes in the roll or pitch axes in order to achieve that 5,000 feet. So let me disconnect everything right now and start with how do we as pilots fly manually by using the flight director. Once we know how to do that, it will be really simple and it will be just a matter of turning on and off the autopilot. So let me go ahead and disconnect everything. Alright, so I have the controls of the airplane. Let's start by looking at how to control the airplane using flight director. So I'll bring up my PFD and we will look at how do we turn on and off the flight director. So really simple, just go to your autopilot panel right here and click on the flight director key. Now when you do that, what it will do is it will bring up that magenta line that we discussed before. Now when you just turn the flight director switch on and do nothing else, what it will do is it will place it on its default mode. Now the default mode will be whatever your last flight attitude was and the roll and the pitch axes. So here in this case, no matter what I do, the magenta line is basically showing me what my last flight attitude was when I turned on the flight director switch on. Now, to monitor all of this, we need to go to our status bar in order to know what flight mode we are on or what flight director mode we are on. So we go up here at the top, which is the status bar, and we look at the leftmost column, which says ROL, which stands for roll. The leftmost box will always show information about any movement in the lateral axis. So not around the lateral axis minded, but in the lateral axis. So things like roll and heading modes will be shown here. The center column will be then the autopilot status. So whether you're in the autopilot mode or the flight director mode, or whether it is turned on or off, things like that. And then the rightmost will be the movement in the vertical axis. So things like if you're in a pitch mode, so whether you're holding a specific pitch, um, if you're holding an altitude, if you're climbing or descending at a constant speed or at a constant flight rate, so things like that. One another thing will be if you see green letters, that means that particular mode is the active mode. So right now, as we see, the ROL and the FD are the and the PIT are the green ones. That means that we are currently in the starting with the center, we are in the flight director mode. So we have the manual control of the airplane. ROL stands for roll. So the flight director is holding a specific roll attitude that we were in when we turned on the flight director. And then it's also holding the specific pitch mode that we were in when we started the flight director. And you'll also notice the white characters ALTS means that is our target flight attitude. So here our target right now is 4,000 feet, since that's where my altitude knob is placed at. So let's start by telling the flight director to help us maintain a specific heading. So let's say you are on 080 right now, as we are. All I simply have to do is just hit the heading button while placing my heading knob on 080. So now the flight director will, first of all, now we can see on the status bar here that nothing has changed except for the leftmost column, where we can see the HDG, which stands for heading, and that is the active mode. So we are in the heading mode now. So what the flight director will do is now it will reflect changes in the lateral axis in order to maintain that 080 heading. So let's put it to a test. Let's try and turn to something else other than 080. So there you can see the flight director is now telling me to kind of turn left. So what I'll do is I'll just simply follow that and place my artificial horizon like so. And once at 080, the flight director will also start to level out, and then we'll just maintain that 080. Okay, so let's now try to tell the flight director to help us change our heading from what our current heading is. So we are on 120 right now. So all I simply have to do is, since I'm already in the heading mode, all I have to do is manipulate my heading knob. So let's say we want to go to a heading of south, 180. So I'll go to my heading knob right here, and I'll twist it until I'm on 180. So now you'll notice that the magenta bar has kind of twisted on the right side, so it's showing me that I should turn right. Notice that it will still show you that last pitch mode that you were on, because we are still maintaining that pitch. All we are asking the flight director is to help us change our heading. So I will just simply put my heading indicator, or I'm sorry, the attitude indicator on that magenta bar, and just follow that. And as it rolls out, I will do that as well. And once we're on the heading of south, the flight director will do its best to help us keep that heading of 180. Okay, let's now try and see how we can maintain our altitude, um, change the altitude, and things like that. So let's just keep flying on this heading 180, and see how we can manipulate our altitude with the flight director. So I will start by simply turning the altitude mode on, and we will see what that does. So here I'm going to click on the altitude key. All right, so what it will do is it will basically take the last altitude that I was on. So here it's telling me that I was flying at 3269 feet, which was my last flight altitude. So now the flight director will continue to hold and guide us to maintain that 3269 feet altitude. So even if I change my altitude knob now, it will not do anything. It will simply reflect changes in the vertical axis to help me maintain that 30 to 69 feet. So now let's put it to test. I'm gonna dive and see what happens. Okay, so I'm at 3,000 feet. So notice the magenta line is really moving in the opposite direction really fast because we're actually going away from our target altitude. So all I have to do is just put my attitude indicator on that magenta bar and simply follow it. So now it's slowly coming down, and I'll still follow it until we are at 3269, obviously, and it will tell us exactly what pitch we should be in order to maintain that 3269. Okay, so it looks like we're right around there, so that is good. um, but now let's say now we want the help from flight director to change our altitude from wherever we are to a new altitude. So let's say I want to go up to 5,000 feet. So I have used the altitude knob to reflect that change, to remind myself that where my target altitude is. So as we can see here, the knob is at 5,000 feet right now. Now we already know, hopefully, that there are two basic ways to change altitude. One of them is a constant speed climb, and the other one is a constant rate climb. So we will start by looking at how we attain that 5,000 feet using the constant speed mode. So now to do that, we don't necessarily have to hit the altitude key before we start doing that. Whenever you hit the altitude key, it will simply hold the last flight altitude that you were in. So here, let me go ahead and turn it off. So now we're once again in that pitch mode, which was the default mode. So now notice in our status bar, we are still in the heading mode because we have not turned that off, but now we have reverted back to the pitch mode, and so it will hold the last pitch attitude that my airplane was in. So I'll maintain that. All right, so let's see how we use a constant speed climb. All right, so at 5,000, we are currently at 3,200 feet. So all we have to do is go to my autopilot pane and hit the FLC key. The FLC stands for flight level change. So I will click on flight level change, and I'll also add full throttle in order to help me climb. So now we can see that the magenta bar is slowly moving upwards. Here's where the concept of constant speed comes in. If you look at our status bar, it will reflect 109 knots. So that was the last airspeed we were in. So it will just take that last airspeed, and the flight director will assume that you want to climb at that airspeed. So I applied full throttle. So obviously I will start gaining the airspeed above 109 knots, and that's why the magenta bar raised a little bit. Now I want to tell the flight director to help me climb at 90 knots. So I will go to my autopilot pane again, and I will focus on the nose up and nose down switches. If I hit nose up, as you can see in the status bar, my airspeed is going down as well. Now I'm telling it that I want to climb at 90 knots. So you can also see that the magenta bar has now slightly pitched up. So all I will do is simply put my attitude indicator on the magenta bar, and surely enough, you can see that my airspeed is dropping, and we will maintain 90 knots until we are at 5,000. Now, once we hit that 5,000, the flight director will automatically go into the altitude mode. So we don't need to hit the altitude button in order to tell the flight director to keep maintaining that altitude. It will do it on its own, since we have already told it that our target altitude is 5,000 feet. Now, one thing you should also note is that if you reduce the throttle, the magenta bar will slowly start dropping, and you won't be able to climb anymore, because the flight director will only look at what airspeed you want to climb at, and it will reflect that pitch information for you to get that airspeed. And obviously with low power you cannot do that. So those are some of the things that you should be aware of. So here I've applied full throttle again. I'll simply follow the magenta bar. Right, so now the magenta bar, or the flight director, is slowly starting to uh, bring its nose down. So we will do that as well. All right, I'll bring back some of that power, and we are cruising. Now we are cruising on the heading of 180, and we are maintaining that 5,000 feet altitude, and the flight director is simply helping us maintain that. So let me try and go in some random flight attitudes. So I have obviously not followed the magenta bar, and so now it's telling me what should I do in order to go back to that heading and go back to that altitude that I asked it to help me maintain. So here we'll just follow that. And we're at 5,000. Okay, so now let's look at how we do the constant rate climbs and descends. Okay, so this time let's descend to 3,000 feet. So what I'm going to do is we will still be using the nose up and nose down buttons, but to activate the constant rate climb or descend, we have to hit the VS switch, or the vertical speed switch. So here I'll hit that. So what it has done is it has taken my last VSI reading, which was minus 200 feet per minute, and it will maintain that in order to help me descend. Now keep in mind that if I was let's say in a positive 200 feet per minute climb and I hit the VS switch, then it will ask me to maintain that 500 feet per minute climb to descend to over 3000 feet, which kind of doesn't make sense. So we will have to tell the flight director what foot per minute descent we want. So we know that if we nose down, we will get a higher rate of descent. So we will come here on our autopilot panel and then hit nose down. And you'll notice that in our status bar, um, um, we are decreasing the numbers. So from plus 500, we have gone to plus 300. And I'll keep doing that until, let's say, minus 700 or minus 900. So we will simply follow that magenta bar, and we have started descending. Now, one more thing to make sure is that we do not have auto thrusts on this airplane, so we will have to manually control the throttle. And in a flight attitude like this, if we don't adjust the throttle, as we can see, we will simply overspeed. So we will bring back our throttle to maintain that airspeed, and this is really slow, so let's just do a 1300 foot per minute descent. And we'll just, let's say, stop at 4000 feet. And surely you can see that as we follow that magenta bar, we were at our target of 1300. All right, so let's level out and start adding that power as we reach our target altitude of 4000 feet. All right, so I think those are all the basics that we need to know on what the flight director is. Now, what we did was simply follow that flight director as pilots. When we turn on the autopilot, it will do exactly the same thing. It will follow the flight director. The only thing, it will be more accurate and more gentle than manually flying it. So let's turn everything off. So once again, at the controls, we have the normal PFD now. And I'll start by clicking on the autopilot switch. Boom. So what now it will do is it will turn on the flight director on its own, but we're in the autopilot mode, meaning that the autopilot is following the flight director. So let's look at our status bar now. We are in the roll mode, the autopilot is turned on, and we're in the pitch mode. Once again, the roll and the pitch were the default modes. So it will hold the attitude in the roll and the pitch axes, which we were in when we turned on the autopilot. So basically the latest flight attitude we were in when we were flying manually. So now let's apply the same concepts as we did in Flight Director to manipulate the airplane by now simply clicking those switches. So let's look at the heading modes. So we want to maintain the heading of 190 since that's what our present heading is. So I'll go to 190 and then hit the heading key. All right, so the flight director will do its thing and the autopilot will simply follow that flight director to maintain that 190 heading. And now let's try and change our heading to, well, let's just go north. So I'll simply twist my heading knob to that 360 heading and let the autopilot do its thing. I'm not touching any controls. it's controlling the airplane on its own. Now notice that we are descending slowly because we had that slightly nose down pitch attitude when we turned on the autopilot, and so it will continue holding that pitch regardless of what your altitude is. And so let's also fix that. Let's say we are at 3760 feet right now, so I'll just hit the altitude mode, and now the airplane will try and maintain that 3759 feet. One interesting thing it will do is it will bring the altitude knob to the nearest upper limit of round numbers. So in this case 3759, so the upper limit was 3800 feet. And so now let's do our constant rate and constant speed climbs and descents. Let's start by doing the constant rates first, and let's climb this time, and then we'll apply the constant speed to when we descend. So this time let's go up to 6,000 feet, and I will hit vertical speed, and our last VSI reading was 0 foot per minute, and so it will reflect that in our status bar. Say we want to climb at 1,000 feet per minute, so I will hit nose up from my autopilot panel and settle at plus 1,000 feet per minute and let the autopilot do its thing. Now it is really important to keep an eye on our airspeed when we do this. I forgot to apply full thrust, so I will go ahead and do that. But even then, it is very important to keep an eye on our airspeed, because let's see what happens if I simply ask the airplane to do more than what it's capable of doing. Let's say 2,000 feet per minute. It will try and do that, and it will keep pitching up. But you'll notice that your airspeed is dangerously getting lower and lower, and there's a real danger of stalling the airplane, and you don't want that to happen. So let's just go back to that 800 feet per minute now. And also, as you climb higher, you should know that the airplane is not capable of holding those higher numbers of flight rates for a climb. Okay, so let's now descend and do that at a constant speed. So I want to go back to 4,000 feet. I'll hit flight level change. I'll reduce some power, and I want to descend at 90 knots. So I'll do nose down until I get to 90 on my status bar. I'm at 90. Now reduce some more power. I'm at currently 1740 RPM. And again, the airspeeds and the power settings should be just like normal when you fly the airplane manually. For example, when you're doing an approach, normally you are between 1700 and 1900 RPM to get that 90 knots of airspeed descent. So here we are just doing that. Let's also throw in a turn to make the airplane do a turning descent. So here we're turning to 060, and we're also descending. Alright guys, so that is all I had for this video. Please like this video if you found it helpful, and comment down below if you have any questions. If anything was unclear, I will try to answer that at the best of my knowledge. One thing I want to mention is that I am a commercial pilot right now, and I am a CFI candidate, so it will really help me if you have any constructive criticism in order to help me improve how I teach. And please also let me know if you would like to see any other quick tutorial videos, and I will see you hopefully in the next video.